got Alex and Naima both a session today, and we'll be starting off this unit, which is the optional unit in your course, which is project management. You'll be able to see my screen is three things. One, obviously, we'll go through the PowerPoint presentation, which covers the learning outcome one. I've also parallelly opened up the assignment view and also the specification. My request to you would be if you mute yourself on your side unless you're asking me questions, and you can do that by when you see the circle on the top, and on the circle, there is a mute button. If you just mute yourself, then you'll be able to, I won't hear any background noise or background talk and on your side, and obviously it'll be clear for everyone to go through the session. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Great. And then when it comes to, obviously, you're able to hear me clearly as well?
Yeah, it's better.
Good stuff. Now, this particular unit, project management is one of the, optional units that we look at in this particular qualification at level 7. And then the reason for looking at this particular unit is because when we look at management roles in particular, and when we look at senior roles, mid-management to senior management roles, we are always, as individuals working on small projects or, small tasks, which are considered projects. Because at some stage you have to imagine that you are working within a responsible area wherein either you have a team responsibility or you have some supervision or supervisory responsibility to be able to manage yourself and a member of, a few members of your team. And when you look at that, what tends to happen is that we need to be able to work, on some of these projects or some of these tasks or small, responsibilities which are time bound, and we work on them, on a basis like they are like small mini projects. So in this particular case, what we tend to do is when we look at this particular unit, the unit will give you a very good understanding of how you manage tasks, how you manage multitasking, and at some stage how you are able to work on small projects which are given and then deliver them to make sure they meet the aims and objectives or guidelines set by the management. In terms of give me 1 second. In terms of the credits for this unit, it is about 15 credits. This is one of the most important units in the level 7 course, because most universities, when you look at progression arrangements, will have some sort of a unit which will give you a full exemption because you've covered this at your level 7 when you're doing the qualification. And the basic essence of this particular unit is that it helps you kind of understand how to break large tasks or responsibilities given, when you work on, time-bound, I'm not going to try and use the word project again, but time-bound responsibilities which have a start, a middle, and an end. You will, using this unit, understand how to treat them as projects and how to work on these projects so that you have a start, you are able to manage them, you are able to monitor the, workings of your team and your, teammates in the project. And at the same time, if there are any issues or any major concerns which arise, then there is a structure within the team which is able to address these issues, and then you implement that change and then bring that particular job or the responsibility given to a successful closure. Now, in this unit, there are 5 learning outcomes, as you can see on the specification sheet here. These 5 learning outcomes we'll try and cover, obviously in 5 different sessions. Today, what we are looking at basically doing is looking at the first learning outcome, which is to understand how projects are created, what is the feasibility, how do we look at the feasibility of the projects, and then what are the various structures involved in creating or, working on these projects. So we look at some of the basic things like, team structures, how subdivisions are made, what are the various resources required when you want to work on this side. And last but not the least, we look at, the feasibility of the proposed projects, because in most cases, these involve, time, effort, and money. So even before you start on a full-time, project, what you tend to do is you try and look at the feasibility of, these projects first to, at some stage find out that these are workable, these are achievable, rather than get into the workings and at a later stage you have to abandon the project. A case in point, an example that I will give you, which will also relate to the assignment, would be the fact that in the assignment brief there is a scenario that as an office manager have been asked to do a role that you are working as an office manager, and within this particular role you've been given the responsibility to look at moving your company offices from London area to Banbury, Oxfordshire, and this is primarily being done to look at reduction of overhead costs which are primarily related to the infrastructure. So before you start moving the office, you have to look at understanding what will be involved, what are the risks involved, who are the persons who are going to be working in this key the office, and last but not the least, will this project be successfully completed, and how much time, effort in terms of money, will be required for this relocation to happen. Now, in this particular scenario, you would not want to get into the activity without where the new office location is, where you have, what will be the cost, and are you looking at saving any costs when you look at rental costs in particular, with regards to some of the place that you're looking at moving to. Now, Alex, just to be sure, is there a background noise that you're in? Alex?
No, I
can hear you. So that's the reason.
No noise.
And Naima, is everything okay at your end? There's some background noise that I can hear.
I find difficult.
Right. And my suggestion is if you turn down the volume of your microphone slightly so that there is no echo.
Yeah, there is a noise.
Just decrease the volume slightly on your side. And the other bit I can do is, if you are hearing some background noise, then what I can do is I can mute everybody else. So if you want to ask any questions, you can. So what I can do is I can, just give me 1 second. I'll try and type this out. So I have muted everyone for now. If you need to ask me questions, please use the chat option to ask the same. This is just to look at, so that there are no distractions in the section in this particular bit. So what I want to be able to do is just muted everyone on this session for now. And if you want to ask me questions, just use one of this window here, and you can use the chat mode to be able to chat to me or ask me that question. So what I will do for now is obviously what we will do for now is basically look at starting off with the first learning outcome, and I'm going to send you a copy of this presentation. This is also available on Moodle, which you can look at, and this will cover the learning outcome 1 for this particular unit, which is project management. I will also send you a copy of the assignment brief. It's all on Moodle in any case, but along with that presentation, you'll just have it handy with you when you're going through the slides. Now, I need a bit of interaction in any case, so I'll have to unmute you, but let's see. All right. How do you define project? What do you think is the definition of the word project? Guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, 1 second.
Yeah. Alex, what do you think is a project? How do you define the word project?
Now, there is a bit much there.
Who's watching Peppa Pig in the background? Okay, I think what I'll do is I'll roll with the presentation for now, and then if you have any questions, then you can ask me, using the chat mode, if that's okay. See, before we start this, I think it's important for us to look at the definition of the word project. And when you look at the definition of the word project, it basically means a series of activities that we have to do in a coordinated fashion to be able to, achieve a certain aim or objective which has been set. The word project is used, project and project management is used quite often now in modern day times, because most activities which people have been asked to do within the organizations or businesses tend to be like small projects or, small mini activities. And because they need to be leading to a meaningful solution, the word project management becomes, important, is because most of these activities lead to some achievement of objectives in terms of, when you look at businesses or organization. And an example that I would give you here would be that if you're, say, for example, going to a birthday party, now that itself is a small mini event wherein you're attending or organizing that party, and you're looking at sending out invites, to various, friends of your, son or daughter. And then at some stage, you're also looking at planning the party altogether at your house or maybe outside. And that would have a lot of elements which will come in terms of, things like catering. It'll also involve things like, after gifts that you have to give away, maybe the cake cutting. And then you're also looking at some stage, maybe ensuring that anybody or, anybody who's able to attend has directions, is able to reach on time, and has a good time as far as, attending that particular event. Now, this particular thing as a small activity, which is maybe an organization of a birthday party, could be treated as a project by the parents because they want their kids' birthday party to be reasonably, or, they want that to be successful, or at least will make attempts to make it reasonably successful. Now, if I have to break this down into a process, what will typically happen is you'll start off with something called initiation. At some stage, you know that there is a date which is coming up, and that is the date on which you have your son's or your daughter's birthday. And that date will kind of will act as a trigger, and that trigger will mean essentially you start the process of looking at planning this birthday party or this event. And that phase is nothing but initiation. Now, what I mean by the word project charter here is that because you're planning a birthday party, you mentally sit down and decide, maybe with your husband or your partner, or maybe with your kids, and you decide what are the success factors going to be in order to plan this event. Now, these success factors or basic things that you want to ensure is that you're looking at calling maybe, say, 20 people who will come in and attend the party. You're looking at doing it in-house or maybe outside. So the basic remit of how you plan this particular event is going to be kind of documented in something called the project charter. And the scoping of the project is going to be realistic. That means at some stage, what you're looking at doing is when you scope this project out, you're going to be realistic that, that I can say, for example, in your in the class, there are 20 students. So obviously, you're looking at calling maybe 20 of them, and you're going to be realistic that about 15 will attend. So the scoping of the project is a key part of project management and is nothing but, classified as something called project planning. And this planning bit that you put into place, which determines how successful the event will be, or whether, in terms of success, and also some of the key variables that we put into place, things like the goals, the aims, objectives, the deliverables, and some of the things like timelines and costs will all be put across in the scope. And the reason why you look at this particular second step, which is scope, is because you want to cost out, and you want to be very clearly knowing what is going to be involved. What are the risks? What are the costs? How much time will it take? Who will attend? And these are things you want to be clear about, because you cannot have them as as variables which can change. Now, once the scope is decided, what you do is you put some sort of a work-based structure. WBS stands for work-based structure. And the work-based structure essentially would mean that you kind of break some of these activities down into smaller, activities. And this breaking down of these activities, the major, the aims and objectives of the project that you've kept, into a certain structure wherein you will start aligning responsibilities and giving or delegate responsibilities and roles to other people to work in that particular event, will be nothing but something called the work-based structure. And work-based structure is nothing but is a key term which we use in project management, and this is defined as something which is called the key deliverables which will be required. And this then forms something called the project management body of knowledge, PMBOK, which I've kind of mentioned here. So this is something which then becomes a clear deliverable, which everybody will work towards. It's like a timeline, it's like a plan documented into some sort of a structure where everybody will work towards and ensure that they play their part. And once they play their part, each of the various subsets or small mini parts of the activity or the event are then successfully happening from time to time, in order for the whole project or the event to be completed. So work-based structures, we typically see that we break it down into things like costs. We want to know what is the cost of planning this birthday party, in terms of catering costs, in terms of venue hire costs, in terms of decoration costs, gifts costs, things like that. You look at timelines, that because the birthday, say for example, is on the 1st of August, you're looking at a timeline wherein how many days before that date you will have to order the birthday cake or a dress, and those kind of things will come across and define time. And then what are the resources that you require? Some of these resources could be physical, some of these resources will be financial, some of these resources will be infrastructure, some of them will be technical. So what we have to look at is, at some stage, the work-based structure, when you look at it, it is a structure or a diagram which consists of things like things and variables which affect the completion of this particular event, which is the birthday party that we are discussing. And that will be divided into variables which affect that event in terms of cost, time, and resources deployed or required for it to make it successful. And this particular bit is nothing but which consists of things like something called the initiation. Starts off with initiation. We define scope. Once the scope is defined, the aims and objectives are known. You break them down into some sort of a structure, and these structures are called WBS, work-based structures. And work-based structures and then are finally aligned with various variables which can change the outcome of the project or outcome of this particular event. So for example, if you do not plan costs well for catering, and you've only ordered or done catering for about, say, 10 people, then you have not taken into account that with the kids, you'll also have parents who will be accompanying the kids. So if you plan for 15, that means you need to know if there is 1 or 2 parents coming in, and then you accordingly plan catering, and that will affect your cost. When you look at catering for that many people, it is also related to time, because it will involve time in terms of serving, the gifts, the packing, and other things. So in a nutshell, when we look at a plan, when we look at starting off a project, we look at these basic set of activities which need to be planned to make a particular project, successful. Now let's look at some of these things, in a bit more detail, and understand the terminology, around project management. Now, one of the key things that we've discussed right now is we started off with something called how do we define project, how project is initiated, and what is the process or the plan overall in terms of the project management. Some of the subsections that we look at is when we look at initiation, initiation is primarily done because before you start the process of initiation, you look at the feasibility of the project. And feasibility is nothing but trying to understand whether this is something which is possible or not. Even after putting in time, effort, resources, time, money, and resources, will this project be feasible? And feasibility is always done if to understand how to understand the hows and the whys before you undertake the project. So that most of these things are clearly documented and are clearly available at your end, so that you are able to kind of you are able to kind of then join, and obviously you're able to kind of then start this, and you clearly know that this is going to be successful. And when we look at feasibility, we look at three different areas of the project feasibility. We look at technical feasibility, we look at the operational aspect, and we also look at economic aspect. So technical aspect is the fact which is related to things like technology, things like, for example, infrastructure and equipment, which will be required to make some of these tasks happen on time and the delivery to meet the schedules. Operational feasibility is going to be the number of people which are going to be involved, what are their roles going to be, who is going to be the project manager, who's going to be the assistant project manager in case the project manager is not available, somebody takes that responsibility over. Key set of people which will be involved, who's the project sponsor, who's going to be the key principal sponsor who will sanction all the costs and approve all the basics of the project. And that is all nothing but operational feasibility. And at some stage, the technical and the operational feasibility links to something called economic feasibility, which is nothing but costs. So in terms of when we look at quality, in terms of deliverability. So for example, you can say the birthday event was fantastic. It was a brilliant event because everybody attended, had a ball of a time, and everybody went back home happy. Now, how was that determined? Is because these three different things worked quite well, which is technical, operational, and economical. That means the costs were appropriately looked at. There was in terms of operationability, when I say the venue was chosen which was suitable, it was central, easy to reach. And when I look at technical, the P&A system, the mic, the cake cutting, the ceremony, and the equipment which was involved in the planning of that event worked flawlessly. So when we look at the feasibility, I think when you look at going and visiting a few venues to see if this is going to be suitable for the birthday party, and is it going to be central enough, is it going to be easily approachable, is there enough parking space? So when you look at all those things, you're looking at the feasibility of planning the event and making it successful. And that first few trips that you go and take and meet and take quotations is to understand how well you will be able to plan this particular event, is all kind of falling under something called project feasibility. Now imagine if you're going to be embarking on something like building if you're a builder and you're looking at embarking on building something in terms of houses on a construction site. So project feasibility becomes very important, is because if you're going to be building, say, 20 houses as a developer, you need to ensure that you clearly know whether the project is viable. The viability in terms of costs is established, costs in terms of operations, people, manpower, and all those things have to be known before you even start the project. You don't want to be in a position as a developer that you run out of money or you run out of cash to be able to deploy and employ people and then complete those houses before the whole plan is done. So that is all done under the context of something called project feasibility. We've got other slides which we look at, which is to understand what is technical feasibility. And this is nothing but you're looking at the availability of appropriate technology to be able to do the project. So for example, if you're building houses, you're looking at technology, things like, you want the houses to be greener. You want the, houses in terms of technology which is required would be things like, lighting. You are looking at greenhouses, you're looking at insulation, you're looking at ways through which the developer is making the development to be much more in tune with the requirements as far as environment is concerned, as far as the requirements from customer side is concerned. And so when you look at some of the technical aspects of it, it is looking at technology, it is looking at the various variables will help you to, at the end of the day, look at giving you an edge. Hello, Alex, are you there? Hello?
Hi there.
Hi, Alex, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
How have you joined the meeting?
I'm using the laptop.
What have you used as a device to join the meeting?
The laptop.
All right, okay, because I can hear a lot of echo in the background when you speak to me. That's fine.
Really?
Yeah, because I think your voice, I can hear a lot of echo. Not a problem. So technical feasibility, you're looking at the equipment in particular, which could be, say, for example, you're looking at computer hardware, you're looking at some software which are required, for example, a project management software that you would probably use to make use of, to keep a tally on what all is happening within the project in terms of documentation. And that would involve, things like you're looking at the technical feasibility side of things. When we come to operational feasibility, we are looking at things which are primarily, to look at primarily the operational side of things, which is manpower in particular. And these will be, things which you will evaluate going into the project, wherein you look at, for example, employees in particular who are willing to work in the project, are willing to contribute, are willing to take up a particular role in the whole process of, the project which is going to be run. And when you get to see these typical situations, an example that I would give you here is, for example, let's look at cooperative bank. Now, in banks, what tends to happen is when they migrate or upgrade the version of softwares from, say, one version to the higher version, what you will typically see is a project management team which gets formed within the organization. And that team is then responsible to look at the migration of, the sets of processes and procedures that they have from a version which is from an older version to a new version. An example that I would give here is, for example, if you're a banking customer with Cooperative, they introduced an app on the iPhone a couple of months back, and that allows you to basically, look at the process of, what you call using banking facility on your phone. But they've been making changes from time to time, and these changes which they are making, are being upgraded in terms of the app interface, when you use it as a customer. So when you look at those changes, what is tending to happen is that you will get to see that there is a project management team which is working, and they are continuously working in the background to make the experience on the app, much better when it comes to users using those applications. And that is nothing but, operational feasibility, is because there are different people within the team who have been given different roles to look at, and they are then responsible to ensure that they have been able to deliver that task, which helps in overall improving that experience. So operational is directly related to employees, the interworking relationships that you will look at when you look at different structures within the team, who is having what responsibility, what is their commitment, and how will they be able to support the transition which is happening, is all nothing but under the operational feasibility. Now, economic feasibility, continuing with the example of the banking application, the banks are spending millions and millions of pounds in terms of creating that application, and that they have to make sure that it meets the criteria at the end of it, it meets the goal which has been set by the management. That means they should be able to have customers use mobile banking using the application, which will reduce their visits to the branches, and as a result, they will be able to maybe streamline their branch operations over a period of 2 to 5 years. And here, when they look at economic feasibility, they look at basically nothing but cost-benefit analysis, or they look at costs in particular. Type of costs, is it manpower cost? Is it cost because of time? Is it cost of software? So basic type of costs can be covered under economic feasibility. And what are the benefits these costs will basically provide in the long term is looked at under that particular purview of when we use the term economic feasibility. Costs can be of different types. As you can see, it could be type of costs, which could be cost related to time, cost related to quality, cost related to the accessibility or the software being involved. So there are different types of costs that we can define when we look at economic feasibility for a project. But just to give you an idea, there are different types, and we need to be aware of these so that at some stage when we look at the feasibility because of reasons for benefit analysis, we know that they are something which are related to economic costs. Just a brief point which I mentioned here, this is on the slide. Costs incurred today obviously are costs incurred in the future, and they are nothing but time is directly related to money, or the costs which are involved in terms of the spend the bank does, and they are then related to directly the type of services which the bank is able to provide. So if they put in more money in the development of the application from day one and have that completed quite quickly, then they can save a bit of cost on the other things which is required in the project timeline. But if they look at this as a long-term project and keep working on it, there is a appropriate number of let's put it this way, there are appropriate costs that they have to keep aside every year, because this is a 2-year project or this is a 3-year project. And assuming if you're able to complete it within a year, obviously the cost then can be appropriated only for a year as far as the project cost is concerned. Now, some of the other things that we look at very briefly, which I've discussed on the first slide, which is the project plan. What is a project charter? This is something which basically is defined as the kind of the nitty-gritties or the nitty-gritties of the project, and this is something which forms the procedural guideline according to which the projects are run. So there's a documented plan. If this happens, you look at this, or if this happens, you do take this action. If this is required to be done, you take this action, and those are things that you primarily look at when you look at the project charter. And the project charter is owned by the management. That means you will have a sponsor which will primarily own that project. So in most companies, when you start on certain improvement areas, for example, they want to improve employee absenteeism, and this project is owned by the department head. So the reason why this is owned by the department head is that they are responsible for doing the review, they are responsible for running the project, the costs of the project, and this is all defined within the project charter, to give you an example. Now, the other bit that we will look at is, in terms of projects, when the projects are initiated, there are always stakeholders in the project. When I say stakeholders would mean that you have people who essentially are a key part and parcel of that particular project plan or that team, and they are termed as stakeholders. Now, stakeholders could be employees, stakeholders could be shareholders, stakeholders could be management, stakeholders could be suppliers. So there are different forms of stakeholders, but stakeholders essentially play an essential role in the whole initiation of the project, from initiation till completion. And we look at some of these shareholders and their roles and responsibilities in the specific slides going forward. The other bit that we will look at very, very briefly would be the fact that when you look at starting a project, you look at essentially talking about the project from a point of view of SMART. And that, when I say SMART, basically means is a term that we use, which is for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time specific. The reason I say this is because when you look at defining objectives, the objectives have to be finite, and we follow this kind of a template, from time to time that we use. And this template or an acronym which stands for SMART means that the project that you're going is going to be specific. It has a start date and a finish date. It is measurable. That means you can clearly, as a management member of the management team, know that I started this project, this is when it started, this is the cost, and these are the benefits that it is going to give. And that becomes the area of measurability. Achievable is because you want the project to be realistic, time bound, and what you have to ensure is when you look at achievability, you have to set objectives which the employees or the staff in the project team can actually accomplish, can actually achieve within a finite time. And that is why we say it has to be achievable. Realistic is, I can't say that we are going to go to, an example is NASA is currently working on a realistic plan of putting man on Mars, and that realistic plan is 2030. So they know that they need so many years to be able to plan these things before actually man sets foot on Mars. If they say that we are going to try and put somebody on Mars in 2020, then everybody knows that this is not going to be realistic because we do not have these many things in place to make that work. So project plans are always realistic so that they are comfortable in terms of timelines, costs, and operational view when people are working within it. And the last but not the least, it is time specific. You want to put in resources, whether it's cost, effort, various type of resources, because you want at the end of it, you want a result. And if the project is open or if it's not time specific, like NASA wants to put man on Mars by 2030. But if they say we want to put a man on Mars, which is an open-ended project and there is no timeline to it, there are no costs associated to it, so it has to be time specific to kind of make it realistic and also measurable, so that everybody has a goal, everybody has some sort of a an objective that they have to meet, and they have to deliver within those times to be able for the whole project to get completed. So that's why we follow this particular charter, which is called SMART, and it has come out of something called a terminology which is used in Prince 2 to define what is called a project. And that is where we look at this as something important when we look at doing most of the definitions of the projects before we even start. Okay. The other bits that we will look at with regards to some bit would be to understand what are the factors which affect the project. Things like environmental factors, things like risks, which are, if you're a developer, like I gave you an example earlier, and you have to look at working capital management as far as the development of the site for houses is concerned. So banks would want to see progress happening before they release more funds for you to be able to deploy to build more houses. And from that aspect, there are lots of factors, or external and internal factors, which affect the workings of a particular project that you have to look at. And those will have to be covered to understand, so that we clearly know what are the factors which affect positively, create risks, and also are related to the quality in terms of management of the project, have to be then looked at. Now, one of the key things which I put here, as a small slide, is that when you look at the assignment brief at your end, what I want to do is there are lots of project management methodologies which can be followed, like Six Sigma, PMP, Prince 2, clear water flow. There are lots of methodologies across the world which are primarily used by different businesses, organizations for project management. Now, Prince 2, which is projects in controlled environment, is a terminology and is something of a technique which was created in the UK and is quite popular globally. So one of the key things that you have to look at in the activity when you do your assignment is you have to look at what is the project methodology that apply to look at this office relocation project. And you have to define the project methodology that I'm going to be using, Prince 2 or any other methodology to basically look at this whole relocation of office from London to Banbury in Oxfordshire. So here, what we want to be able to do is understand the different types of project methodology which are available. And this, to a certain extent, will give you an idea into how projects are planned. And Prince 2 is a particular process or a methodology which allows and takes into account the three key factors when projects are put into place and the workings of the project are put into place, and they include things like technical, operational, and economic feasibilities. And that is why it's a very popular project management approach, which a lot of businesses and organizations use, going forward. We will cover project methodology in the next session, but it is something which is food for thought that you have to look at, so that you are able to read from the handout that I'm going to send you after the session, and will give you an idea in terms of what are the various types of methodologies which are available as far as workings for the projects are concerned. So the other slides which I've just highlighted, which I'm going to send you on the email, which you can read through, is things that we've discussed, like stakeholders and how stakeholders within the project actually affect the workings of the project, the costings of the project, the completion of the project, and the execution of the project. And that is what we need to understand when we look at different types of stakeholders. Now, when we look at stakeholders in particular for the project management, there are these basic types of stakeholders that we look at and their responsibilities, and when you start something in terms of a project. So one is something called a project sponsor, the word that I've used before, which means the person who has the money. In short, the person who is financing this project, the person, for example, like when we look at a lot of research projects which are taken by scientists in the UK and in the EU, the financer for that project is the government, the European Union, the European Parliament, and these people set the aims and objectives because they have the money. They want people to work on certain aims and objectives to deliver certain things which are required under that particular project, and they are called project sponsors. Senior management is people who are basically going to be responsible for scoping the project, people who are going to be reviewing the project, people who will form the project charter or the Bible kind of thing, which everybody will follow, the book everybody will follow in terms of guidelines when they're working on the project. The team is then put together by the senior management and the project sponsors. They bring in the best people to work on the project, who's going to be the project manager, who's going to be the finance person, who's going to be the operational person, the technical director. These kind of people will then form the project team. There will be somebody who will be the functional manager, and the functional manager will be people within the team who will work on specific tasks and activities. And these tasks and activities are going to be very specific for the project. One such example would be a person who is responsible for maintaining communication channels or updates on communication across the project team. So this person would be a functional manager. His role is primarily to ensure that there is smooth, effective transfer of information across various people and structures within the organization who are working within the project management team. And that would be something which is an example of a functional role. The project management is the person who is responsible for the overall project. That means this person will have more or less the final say after the project sponsor. He or she will actually decide how the project will work, what are the workspace structures going to be, what teams are going to be, who's have what responsibility, and that kind of things are decided by the project manager. Now there are other stakeholders that could be there in the whole team. And these stakeholders primarily going to be customers. They could be external experts from time to time. The project manager would bring in maybe a consultant to consult on certain activities that he isn't sure of or his team is not sure of. And those are people that you will see will become the other stakeholders as far as the people involved in the project is concerned. And then, as for not the least, just to summarize, we started off with project initiation. We looked at a few bits and pieces of how the projects are started by the formation of a project charter, scoping of the project which is done, and then work-based structures will lead to the project implementation or the management plan, PMP basically as we call it. And at some stage we look at the basic stakeholders which are involved in the project, so that we have equal participation or participation from all walks of the team or different members within the team in the company or the organization, which make this particular project successful. I'm going to stop here for today, and I think this will basically cover just the first learning outcome, which is to understand the business objectives of how projects feasibility is determined. And I'm going to send you a copy of this presentation along with the detailed handout, which will cover some, details in terms of this project management process that I've talked about, and also the different methodologies that we have in the market out there when we look at doing or starting off something to do with project management. So let's have a read through this for this week, along with the assignment brief and the specification, so that you have a good idea in terms of how we're going to approach this. I think in the assignment, when you start to do, we have to look at a scenario which is of office relocation, and when you do the assignment, it has to be done in that context wherein you explain and do most of the tasks given in the assignment brief with the context of office relocation, and you being the manager responsible or the project manager responsible for this office relocation for any company, for a company that you can decide to take on, and as an example, and then do this assignment activities with that context in mind. As always, any questions, any queries, please feel free to email / discuss that with me on on the phone, and I will be able to send across some details to you straight away, pretty much after our discussion. There is a book that we have also on Moodle, which details out the whole unit in terms of project management, and that's what I would want to just very briefly show you. And this book is something that you can download and obviously go through. It gives you pretty much it covers pretty much most of the unit in a bit more detail, and I think I'm going to be referring to this book from time to time. It's quite an exhaustive book. As you can see, it's about 914 pages. We are not probably looking at going through the whole book over these sessions, but what I'm going to do is obviously ask you to read some pages of the book, which will help in doing the assignment at some stage when you start doing it, when you look at some of the activities for the assignment. So thanks very much for joining this session today, and I will catch up with you on the phone individually to see and obviously look at your progress.